This is River Ridge Frame Shop, called Frame It Today, where we can take your art, customize it, and get it ready to hang on the wall. Here at River Ridge Hardware, 2803 West Garland.
Welcome to a new kind of talk show, Spokane Talks, where you find news, views, and conversations that include respect for opinions, facts, and diversity.
Spokane Talks, Saturdays at 8 a.m. on Fox 28.
Welcome to the region's only public safety talk show. It's time again for the Sheriff's Report, your weekly report from Spokane County Sheriff Ozzie Sheriff's Report covers a variety of public issues in Spokane County and is now in its fourth year on the air. Sheriff's Report is sponsored by River Ridge Hardware. Now, here's your host, Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich.
Well, good morning. This is Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich with the Sheriff's Report. Today, we're going to talk about Senate Bill 5497, which became what is being called sanctuary state law. And over the last week, I've been talking with a couple of officials from ICE, trying to work a time so they could come in, talk to you about what's going on within this realm and the stories that you're not hearing from the national media. I think it's important that you hear from the people actually doing the job as to what is going on, what the pressures they're facing, and what these type of laws actually are doing to them and to the work that they do, and the impacts it has. So as we move through this, a lot of this is going to be through PowerPoint. That way you can take a look at it. If you miss something, you can always rewind it, freeze it, and read the law. I did not take the entire law and put it onto PowerPoint. I took the really pertinent facts about the law and some of the things that it says and some of the things that have the major impact. The one thing I want you to concentrate on, though, right up front is this bill was basically kind of a Trojan horse, if you will. The bill is preamble basically states that it's an act relating to establishing a statewide policy supporting Washington's economy and the immigrants' role in the workplace. So it added a few seconds to RCW 43.17, and I found it really interesting because, you know, one of my deputies, when he brought me the law, went, I can't believe that they basically hid this within a law that says it's basically supporting the economy. So Section 1 of the new law states that the legislature finds that we have a diverse workforce, and it's important to the economic viability of the state. Nearly 1 million Washingtonians are immigrants, and that means basically 1 out of 7 Washingtonians are immigrants who work here, that own businesses, that do a lot of good things in the economy, and I really support that statement. I know a lot of the people that in our various immigrant communities, they do a great job. They contribute to the economy, and they contribute to our way of life here in Spokane County. They're great people, and most importantly, the resounding message I think that they portray is this. Look, we didn't come here to change America. We came here to enjoy America's freedoms. And as a second generation American, I can understand that, because my great-grandfather and my grandfather came from the old country. And as you've heard me state before, when my grandfather came over and he went through the process, and I read the letters, when he became a citizen, he wrote, "I am finally a citizen of my country." And he considered the United States his country even before then. He took great pride in being an American. And the vast majority of immigrants are very, very hardworking people, very great people. And it really bothers me that the legislature and our governor are playing political football with them. Because nothing that I do, and really nothing that ICE does, affects a legal immigrant that comes to this country. The only thing that we ever focus on is this word called illegal. And that word is vastly missing from the discussion, both inside this law and surrounding this law. And the hysteria that has been primed by the national media about immigration and enforcement of immigration. Folks, I've been sheriff through 3 presidential administrations now. President Bush, President Obama, President Trump. The laws didn't change. They were enforced the same way. Matter of fact, when we get to the end of this discussion, you're going to see that the laws really didn't change. Since 1996, they haven't changed in a lot of different respects to what we do. So if you take a look at subsection 3 of the sanctuary state law, again, it recognizes the great contributions that our immigrant community brings to the state of Washington. It goes on in continuing in section 3, in subsection 1, to talk about, in order to establish and maintain this relationship, they're going to form a work group. And this work group is going to do certain things. And one of them is to support business and agricultural leaders in making sure that we have a predictable and sustainable and stable workforce. If that was really the main drive of this, then why not just state the immigration system is kind of broken? The visa process is broken. Why not state that we need to take a look at how do we streamline a process so people who have jobs can go and get the employees that they need to fill those jobs if they need a visa to come into the country? Why can't we have that discussion? Where is that discussion in this other than we're going to restrict law enforcement from working with their federal partners? Shouldn't the discussion, if you really are truly focused on the stability of our workforce, wouldn't it be better to fix a system that is preventing that stability? And it surely isn't your law enforcement. It surely isn't ICE, because we're focused on that word that, again, doesn't really appear too often, illegal. So the Attorney General is supposed to get a hold of the stakeholders and start working through this process. And at the end of the day, it's to ensure that they, meaning the people that are working here, immigrants, remain safe and accessible to all Washingtonian residents regardless of immigration status and citizenship. That means schools, health care, everything. And remember, it says regardless of their immigration and citizenship status. In section 4, subsection 4, you have, and I always kind of call these things, you know, well, we need to make sure that we have it in this law kind of our cover, you know, because if we're doing anything outside the federal law, we could jeopardize our grants, we could jeopardize federal funding. So you're going to see this language throughout this new law in that, you know, if implementation of this policy, it has to be within state and federal law so that we don't have any problems receiving funding. The only thing they really worry about is jeopardization of funding. In Section 5, we see that they start talking about placing restrictions. And it says, no state agency, to include law enforcement, may use agency funds, facilities, property, equipment, or personnel to investigate, enforce, cooperate with, or assist in the investigation or enforcement of any federal registration or surveillance program or any other laws, rules, or policies that target Washington residents solely on the basis of their race, religion, immigration, or citizenship status, or national or ethnic origin. This subsection doesn't apply to any program with the primary purpose of providing persons with services or benefits. So as long as we're giving, we're okay. If we're talking about enforcement at all, not so much. There's a major problem with this section. People didn't think this one through very well because it's not just the illegal immigrant family that is portrayed that our immigration laws are targeted at, because if you listen to the mainstream media, if you listen to the activists, you would think that the only people having laws enforced upon them are families. And I can tell you in Spokane County, I can't think of, in 14 years, any families that we've gone out and disrupted. I just can't. I don't have a recollection of that whatsoever. So why the law? And why isn't it focused on the fact that we also, in reference to this particular section, are precluded from going after people that are convicted felons, that may have gang associations, because those are some of those surveillance programs that they're talking about here. Now, some people might argue, well, that'd be a criminal nexus. Well, how would we quite know? Because sometimes when we look at different aspects of who's in the country and we identify that this person is in the country illegally, and then we start taking a deeper dive as to who they actually are, these things build silos where information doesn't come across rapidly. We'd have to go and double check, well, all right, do we make sure that we have a clear criminal nexus? And during that time, this person slips through our area, we lose track of them. Again, not very well thought through, not very well planned. And again, don't say, well, if it's a crime, you can. Because by the time we try to make sure we are covering all our bases, we could be in a major bind, especially when we come into the other sections of this law. The Section 5 in subsection 2 spells out the policies that we're supposed to be forming. And it says that the state agencies listed in subsections 5 and 6 of this section shall review their policies and identify and make any changes necessary to ensure that information collected from individuals is limited to the minimum necessary to comply with subsection 3. Again, what did I tell you about the problematic aspects of this law? Because if we run into somebody, let's say it's they're speeding, we pull them over, and let's say they don't have a license or they do have a license, it comes back as a they have a detainer, or they are in the country illegally. We're really not supposed to be passing that information and contacting ICE. But let's walk down this a little bit further. Without our ability to contact ICE, because they have different databases than we do, we could miss the fact that this was, yes, a gang member. This was, yes, a terrorist. This was, yes, a convicted felon. This law is not good for the citizens of this community. Be they here legally, be they natural citizens, or be they illegal immigrants, because this law also continues to drive that wedge between our immigrant community and law enforcement, because it portrays it as we're coming after you. We're always there. We're always looking for papers. No, it doesn't happen that way, folks. And most importantly, we need our immigrant community to come to us if they know about criminal actions. We need our immigrant community to come to us if they've been a victim of crime. And if you're an illegal immigrant in those categories, when you come forward, we start working on getting you visas. We start working on getting you help to make sure that you're taken care of, that you're no longer victimized, and there's a great possibility you get to stay in the United States because we're working towards that visa. Why isn't that ever put out? Why is it that the progressive socialist mantra is always law enforcement is the problem, law enforcement is the bad guy? You have to worry about us. And that's the way these laws portray the relationship. Because if you remember, back at the beginning of this bill, we have to make sure that we have a good relationship. Well, we would if you would stop the mantra. So again, we have our disclaimers. It says, nothing in this law prohibits collection or use of information that is required by federal or state law. And I'm going to hammer on this a little because at the end you're going to understand why that is such an important aspect. Or a court order. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on every section. Just I'll put them up. You can stop it sometime later and read it, understand it. I put it out there just so you can actually understand what's inside this law. In this one, in Section 6, the legislature finds that it is not the primary purpose of state and local law enforcement agencies or school resource officers to enforce civil federal immigration laws. They didn't even have to say that because it isn't. We know that, and we don't work towards that end. Again, it's always that false narrative. It's always paint the picture that this is going on. Well, it's not. And that is my biggest frustration with the sanctuary state law, is it paints a very false picture. One that I quite frankly heard little innuendos of during a conversation at a board meeting yesterday. And I'm like, folks, let's get real. Stop believing the hype. The reality is that it's not happening. It goes into school resource officers and how they are supposed to deal with the immigration issues. We also, in Section 6, talks about state and local law enforcement agencies may not inquire or collect information about an individual's immigration or citizenship status or place of birth unless there is a connection between such information and an investigation into a violation of state or local criminal law. Again, people didn't walk those scenarios out very well. This can become problematic. This can become what creates silos. In subsection 5, state and local law enforcement agencies may not provide non-public available personal information about an individual, including individuals subject to community custody pursuant to those two RCWs, to the federal immigration authorities in a non-criminal matter. Again, a traffic violation is a civil infraction. If we're not allowed to reach out and talk to our federal partners when we know that we're dealing with somebody in this country illegally, we again build those silos because we do not have the clear picture of who this person may be. Section 6 continues, and if you take a look at it, it again further restricts what we can as far as law enforcement do. It dictates that we can't even allow immigration authorities to interview somebody that we have in our custody, which is again creating silos and again very dangerous for our communities. Continuing with Section 6, an individual may not be detained solely for the purpose of determining immigration status. I think that one speaks for itself. The problems within that. If they're not giving us a good name, if we can't identify who they are, that gives us great pause, because it's not the fact that we're trying to figure immigration status, we're trying to figure out who an individual is. Again, it creates a potential of silos. If you take a look at subsection 14, the Department of Corrections may not give federal immigration authorities access to interview individuals about their immigration violations while they are in custody. Folks are in custody because they committed a crime at that point. Especially if we're talking DOC, that means there was a conviction. I just don't understand the rationale of these lawmakers. And here it is in Section 7. We have a section that says, to ensure state and law enforcement agencies are able to foster community trust necessary to maintain public safety. Well, your whole bill did nothing but erode that, because it pushed a narrative that was false. Your public, local, and state law enforcement are not out enforcing immigration status. We're not asking people for their papers unless we find a really good reason to, and that's if we come in contact, usually with some kind of violation. Subsection 8, which is amazing, because Section 8 refers to the Title 8 of the U.S. Code, Section 1373. And this is what 1373 says. 1373 was signed into law in September 30th, 1996 by President Bill Clinton. And it says, notwithstanding any other provision a federal, state, or local law. Notwithstanding means regardless if there's a federal, state, and local law, a federal, state, or local government entity or official may not prohibit or in any way restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from the Immigration and Naturalization Service information regarding the citizenship or immigration status, lawful or unlawful, of any individual. Going back to Section 8 of this new law, again, this is your disclaimer. It basically says everything we set up in this law, we can't enforce because we revert back to Title 8 of the United States Code. And again, in Section 9, we have another disclaimer. Any part of this act found to be in conflict with federal requirements are prescribed, and they put at risk the funds coming from the federal government. Well, then we go back to the federal law. Why is this so important, and why do I want ICE agents to come in and chat with us? Well, in fiscal year 2018, ICE made 158,000 arrests. 90% of those had criminal convictions. You can read the rest of it. Detentions, they detained 396,000 people, which is an increase of over 22% from 2017. Wait till you see 2018's numbers compared to 17 or 18. 2019's numbers compared to 18. They're going to be astronomical. And the reason that they say this difference between 17 and 18 showed a surge in illegal border crossings, you haven't seen anything yet. Because in 2019, this surge that they said they identified in 18's looks like a walk in the park compared to what we're seeing in 2019. And who did they remove? Well, ICE removed convicted criminals from our country that were here illegally. And 6,000 of them, nearly 6,000 of these people, were classified as either known or suspected gang members or terrorists. Nearly 6,000. And you don't want to enforce your borders. One of the discussions I had in talking with ICE about coming in and talking, he said, look, Sheriff, the gangs we're talking about is MS-13. We don't even track most of the others, but we track MS-13, and we track them very closely because they kill people. Why isn't this the discussion? Why isn't the discussion that ICE is protecting us rather than, ICE is only interested in coming and breaking up families? And that's another issue that we'll discuss with the ICE agents, because the way they enforce and the way they've been doing their job, as one agent told me, Sheriff, it's been the same way for the last 30 years. Nothing changed. The only thing that changed is the political rhetoric. And that political rhetoric has changed. Why is it that our elected officials who at one time voted on and passed these type of laws are now saying we can't enforce them? That's a question for you to start asking your elected officials. For me, it's pretty clear cut. I don't have to worry about too much, because at the end of the day, I go back to the default that's already in the sanctuary state law of Title 8 of the U.S. Code, Section 1373, and I will enforce the laws of the United States and the state of Washington because they are not in conflict. This law was crafted simply to give our governor a platform while he runs for president. This is a politically motivated law. It really says nothing, but he got his 30 seconds of fame by signing it. And he got to take a shot at his political opponent by signing it. But at the end of the day, it did nothing. At the end of the day, he didn't talk about the real issues. He didn't talk about the issues of why can't we fix the visa process? Why can't we do everything that this law at the beginning said we want to do? Really comes down to the fact that our visa process is broken. If we can put a man on the moon, why can't we fix a visa problem? And instead of demonizing law enforcement and your ICE agents for doing a job of protecting this country, why can't you see politics for what politics is? Pretty shameful when you break down the law. It's pretty shameful when you take a look at what they're doing. And quite frankly, folks, I talked to 2 of our state representatives, and I'm verifying some of the things that I was told. And if what I was told is true, that our House of Representatives refused to hold a moment of silence for a fallen officer in the state of Washington, first time in the history of the House. If that's true, well, there's going to be more to come. Talk about a disgrace. This is Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich with the Sheriff's Report. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Sheriff's Report is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksMedia.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Sheriff's Report is sponsored by River Ridge Hardware. Ask Ozzie a question, recommend a guest, or hear this program again on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SpokaneTalksMedia.com.